and even though it's covered on Yahoo Sports somehow.
Yeah.
Supreme Court appears to side with wedding web designer opposed to same-sex marriage. This is a big deal.
Yes.
This is like a big Supreme Court case,
Mhm.
and it's going to have some really big implications going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, feel free to go through it.
So the Supreme Court's conservative majority appeared sympathetic to a Christian graphic designer, argued that being forced to work with same-sex couples would violate her belief. That's not actually what she claimed. But again, this is the Independent and not a more conservative source. So
what was the actual claim, Stephen? Just so we know. Well, what did she actually claim?
So this statement that they made argued that being forced. Well, what she's actually refusing to do is that she's refusing to make a website for their their homosexual wedding websites.
Yes.
So that people can like RSVP and like have their gift registry. So she's like, I'm not making a website for that.
Yeah. So they're trying to frame it like, like you refuse to work with same-sex couples, not you refuse to work on a same-sex project.
Yeah. Which of course is the same line of argumentation as Jack Phillips, where he's like, I'll make a cake for you, but I'm not going to make a gay wedding cake. Because I'm refusing a service. I'm not refusing service.
Yeah, like you can provide them with a cake, but you won't do something that
violates your own conscience.
Well, because you're celebrating.
Yep.
By making a cake, you're celebrating something, promoting something that you don't agree with.
By your actions, you're involuntarily promoting it.
Yeah.
So Laurie Smith, who runs 303 Creative, argued that an adverse ruling would force religious artists to carry out work on gay weddings against their religion, which is true. During 2 hours of spirited arguments, the justice appears to be split down ideological lines, with 6 conservatives seeming to ally with Ms. Smith and her supporters' arguments. In one awkward moment that caused a stir on social media, Samuel Alito asked whether a ruling against Mrs. Smith hypothetically meant that a black Santa Claus would have to take a picture with a child dressed up in a KKK outfit. Justice Alito also asked whether the ruling would compel a photographer to take pictures for the marital infidelity website Ashley Madison. The 3 liberal justices raised concern that a ruling support Ms. Smith would result in businesses being able to discriminate against black, Jewish, or Muslim customers. The Associated Press reported. Justice Sonia Sotomayor said the court rules in Ms. Smith's favor. It would be the first time that a court had ruled that a business could refuse to serve a customer based on race, sex, religion, or sexual orientation, which is not true. But of course, it's Sotomayor, and she is a joke.
And like a lot of conservatives call her like a really stupid, because she made some really dumb arguments when when Dobbs came. She made some really dumb arguments. It's like, how are you a Supreme Court justice? It was really bad. What are your thoughts, Stephen? On the story?
I'm glad that they will decide in favor of Miss Smith.
Yep.
But it says in the article, but the article is very pro the bill, because they say that it would protect same-sex and interracial marriage, when in fact what it would do, it would impose these businesses would not be allowed to refuse. Because right now, of course, it is a First Amendment issue, and right now it is an issue of religious freedom, whereas the bill, Protection of Marriage Act.
Respect for Marriage Act.
Respect for Marriage Act. Respect for Marriage Act, yes.
What are you chewing, barbels? So I recommend people listen to Ben Shapiro's take on this. He had a really brilliant take. Basically, and I didn't understand this before. I didn't actually fully understand. What happens is in the original Constitution, you're not allowed to compel behavior.
Yep.
That was the thing. That's the freedom of association. You can associate with who you choose, and you can refuse to associate with who you don't want to associate with. That was freedom, right? But during the 1960s and 70s, when they drafted the Civil Rights Act, they basically, in an effort, probably a good faith effort to try to eliminate discrimination or the ability to refuse service to people for whatever reason, they went a little too far, and they basically created a rule in the law that basically, like, essentially argue that you can't discriminate. Okay, so discrimination is bad. But what's happened is that now that you have two conflicting problems. On the one hand, the Constitution, like, supposedly says you have a right to associate with who you choose. In other words, you have the right to choose if you want to work or not work with somebody for whatever reason. However, with the new discrimination laws, anti-discrimination laws, they're now basically making it so that, you know what, discrimination bad, and it doesn't matter what it is, all discrimination bad.
Yeah.
So the left wing activists and a lot of the activists that are arguing this case are basically realize that there's a humongous self-contradiction within the law, where basically it's like, on the one hand, you can't discriminate. On the other hand, you can't violate conscience. And so the way that the justices are likely going to resolve this is they're going to say, okay, you can't discriminate except for this little like section where religion. They're trying to create a box where you can discriminate as long as you're in the box of religion.
Yep.
That's basically the way that they're trying to solve this conundrum. And it's not going to hold ultimately, because in order to kind of justify what the distinctions are, they have to make very arbitrary distinctions. Like, for example, are you only allowed to discriminate if you're doing art, but not if you're just making a product? Like, where's the line? It's like, what's artistic, what's not artistic? Alito was even arguing. It's like, okay, well, you can like, there's a distinction between like immutable characteristics, which is something you can't change, and something that isn't immutable, which is desires. Desires are not immutable characteristics; they're a totally different thing. And all kind of distinctions that need to be made. The problem right now is that America is in a real conundrum where they have two conflicting forces. You can't discriminate, but also you can't violate conscience. And the problem is which one of these is going to is eventually rule out. What I believe is that discrimination laws are a problem entirely. The problem is discrimination laws, not the not the violation of conscience. Okay? Because I don't believe that you should be forced to do something that you don't want to do. But unfortunately, the government and a lot of these like pro-tyranny forces, they love the no discrimination laws because they can force people to do something that they don't want to do. And that is the problem. This law is an anti-freedom. Any law that forbids discrimination of any kind is anti-freedom, and it makes the government the ethical police. Like we talk about, like how Iran had to, like, it's dealing with protesters because of the morality police. Well, we want to install morality police here in North America that basically say, no, you have to do what we say, or else you're going to jail. They're forcing this. This is forced benevolence, which is wrong. And that takes us to the next story that we want to link this to. This is from the Post Millennial. The story is: inclusive Virginia restaurant cancels Christmas party after LGBTQ staff refused to serve Christians. Welcome to the double left, where some believe Jack Phillips must be forced to create a wedding cake as part of a celebration of a same-sex ceremony, but any business should be able to deny basic goods and services to those who hold biblical values around marriage. So the problem was Metzger Bar and Butchery, a Richmond, Virginia restaurant that says it prides itself on being an inclusive environment, recently canceled a reservation just 90 minutes before its scheduled time for a Christian group that they say made their female and LGBTQ staff feel uncomfortable and unsafe. Late last week, the restaurant posted an explanation on Instagram as to why they canceled the reservation. Metzger Bar and Butchery has always prided itself on being an inclusive environment for people to dine in. The statement began, "In 8 years of service, we have rarely to anyone who wished to dine with us. Recently, we refused service to a group that had booked an event with us after the owners of Metzger found out it was a group of donors to a political organization that seeks to deprive women and LGBTQ plus persons of their basic human rights in Virginia. We've always refused service to anyone making our staff uncomfortable or unsafe, and this was the driving force behind our decision. Many of our staff are women and are members of the LGBTQ plus community. All of our staff are people with rights who deserve dignity and a safe work environment. So basically, this story is, hey, we don't like you. Therefore, we're not going to serve you. That's basically what they said.
Mm-hmm.
That's discrimination.
Yep.
But it's acceptable discrimination because
it's in one direction.
The way that the left works, it's like it's okay when we.
Yep.
Right. Now, if you take the law that the Supreme Court is trying to enforce, like you could argue that that law is them to have to force them to serve Christians. No, because if you understand properly how the left works, they will make laws that only work one direction. They will only punish people who are Christian, but they will never punish people who are LGBTQ or to force them to not discriminate, because they'll define it as this is not discrimination, even though they're complete and total double standard morons. Anyway, Steve, what do you think about this the double standard here?
Well, it's not surprising in any way. Right. Anybody who has understood and watched what's been happening on the left, we can't even say they're hypocrites anymore because they don't care.
No, they don't care about them.
Because it's but we're tolerant, and we're just being bigoted against bigots, and so therefore that's not bigoted. Mm-hmm. Because we're just discriminating against the bigots, and they deserve to be discriminated, and they deserve to be in jail. There was polls. They're oh yeah, do you agree that people who disagree with homosexual marriage should be imprisoned? And a large segment of the people who were asked on this one, I'd have to go back and find this. It's yep, they should be imprisoned. Yeah, they should be imprisoned for disagreeing on a highly contentious issue, because that's how the left thinks about things.
Yeah,
it's disagree with me or be severely punished. Guess what? Who else thought like that? The worst dictatorial regimes in history.
Yeah, I mean, even when we were during COVID, when we had the lockdowns, do you remember how people were so willing to segregate?
Oh yeah,
and they couldn't see it. They literally couldn't see it. They're well, this is different. I'm how? And I literally walked them through it. They literally couldn't see the similarities. I'm yep. I actually called more than one person a moron.
Mm-hmm.
I'm you don't see because you don't want to see, and you're an idiot. Because you can't even figure this out. The thing that a 5-year-old can figure out, you can't figure out. That's the discrimination that people are perfectly happy with. But this is the problem with discrimination laws. Is that it's one thing to say in a society, you can't hurt that person. You can't Stephen can't go out to the street, throw a rock at somebody because he's hurting somebody. That's illegal, so we're going to punish him for breaking a law. That law is actually you're hurting someone. However, these laws are basically forced benevolence. Mm-hmm. And I oppose any law that forces people to do what the people in charge believe is a good thing. Any law that says you have to give to charity, I'm no, I'm against that. I like giving to charity. I think people should choose, but you not get to force people to give to charity.
Yep. Well, even churches that are forcing. There was, when we were doing our preliminary church hunting stages, there was one or two churches that are yep, in order to be a regular parishioner, you have to show evidence that you're giving this amount to the church. I'm nope. I'm that's not biblical. It's yes, we should totally be giving, but we should not be doing so out of a compulsion.
It's like Reverend whatever the guy's name on The Simpsons is just a reminder, everybody.
Lovejoy.
Lovejoy. Yeah, Reverend Lovejoy. He's just a reminder, when 10% tithe is it's not off the top, it's the whole thing. That's gross, people, not net. Please don't force us to audit. And I was yeah, that
Thank you for donating to the church today.
That's right. Oh my goodness. I don't like forced benevolence of any kind.
No.
This is why I'm not in favor of anti-discrimination laws, because ultimately, like they make them sound like we're helping people do good things so people don't feel left out. I'm like, you can't force people to associate with people that they don't agree with.
Yep. If you don't like that business because they disagree with you, then go to a different one.
Yes.
It's a web designer. It's a bake shop. There are others.
Yeah.
It's not like this is a 1 in a million. And even if it was 1 in a million, then it's like, find a way.
Mm-hmm.
You do not have to force your beliefs or force others to accept you under punishment of death or having their life completely destroyed because you feel slighted.
Yeah. Now, I will say this. There's a distinction. I don't think that there should ever be a government-sponsored effort to mass discriminate.
Yeah.
Like segregation laws, I agree. The government should not be making laws that discriminate.
Yep.
Okay? But there's a very big difference between individuals.
Yes.
Individual people, individual businesses, you should not be forcing them to do
comply
something,
with
comply with whatever you want them to do. I think that's where the problem lies. So if you want to be consistent, government should not be like forcing people to comply with to do good, but individuals should not be forced to violate their own consciences. That's consistent.
Definitely. All right, we're gonna